Have you ever found yourself feeling defeated after a heated discussion, as if every word spoken had drained your strength? Perhaps you've encountered individuals whose loud voices, habit of interrupting, and arrogant taunts created an atmosphere of dominance. And perhaps, deep down, the thought arose that silence was akin to weakness, that refusing to defend yourself was a surrender. But what if all of this is merely an illusion? What if true strength lies not in words, but in their absence? A philosopher whose ideas are often misinterpreted managed to perceive what many fear to acknowledge. Excessive talkativeness leads to excessive vulnerability. One who seeks to persuade is inherently at a disadvantage. The world teaches us to fight, explain, and defend our beliefs, as if every conversation is a battle for truth. Yet, there exists another, more subtle and wise path. Silence is not merely an absence of sound. It is a powerful presence capable of unsettling and forcing interlocutor to confront themselves. This text is for those who feel ignored and undervalued, whose words remain unheard. For those tired of being an easy target, the good person whose calm demeanor is exploited by others. Perhaps silence has been mistakenly taken for compliance, but today, its true power will be revealed, making it clear that genuine victory is not a one argument, but the ability to avoid it altogether. Prepare to view silence from a new angle, not as the absence of a reply, but as its highest form. What follows will be a deep dive into the philosopher's ideas to understand how one can control any situation without uttering a single word. Why does the need arise to respond, refute, correct, and prove oneself right? The reason lies in the conviction that truth must be defended at all costs, and that silence is equivalent to defeat. However, the philosopher considered this a manifestation of weakness, the fear of appearing vulnerable. Hidden behind this fear is the ego, unable to tolerate doubt, perceiving disagreement as an attack, and transforming any conversation into a battlefield. According to the philosopher, in an argument, most people seek not truth, but power, striving to assert their beliefs not because of their solidity, but out of fear of their destruction. In this context, argumentation is not a tool for knowledge, but a defensive mechanism, a desperate attempt by the ego to maintain control. What does this mean in practice? It means that by feeling the need to justify and prove one's point of view, one has already entered someone else's game and is suffering a defeat. The very need for justification signals a desire to be accepted and understood. The philosopher called this herd morality, the behavior of those who live under the weight of others' expectations, striving to appear good and right. But it is precisely this pursuit of approval that makes a person weak. True strength, according to the philosopher, lies not in the ability to persuade, but in the absence of such a need, in the capacity to maintain one's vision despite mockery, criticism, and rejection, remaining unwavering even when misunderstood. The author proposes a concept of strength that manifests not in verbal battles, but in profound inner self-mastery. It is a strength born from the ability to maintain composure amidst widespread panic, a strength that grows when one stops automatically reacting to external stimuli. To achieve true victory, it is necessary to realize that engaging in meaningless debates is like playing a theatrical role where the one who steps onto the stage first is already doomed to fail. Friedrich Nietzsche asserted that a mind prone to reaction is an enslaved mind, The true danger lies in the observant mind, which needs no constant validation of its correctness. But the question arises, how can one exert power over others without resorting to reactions? If words seem an unreliable instrument, how can one make others feel their strength without uttering a single phrase? Nietzsche saw the answer in the concept of the Übermensch, a being who transcends the limitations of conventional morality and governs the world through absolute self-mastery. Further on, this prominent figure will be examined in detail, illustrating how they embody the strategic use of silence as a potent weapon of dominance. Nietzsche addressed not the faint-hearted, but those few who possess enough courage to look deep within themselves, to confront their suffering, and to transform it into a wellspring of strength. According to the philosopher, the ordinary person is mired in conventions, moralizing, and the pursuit of external validation. However, there exists another type of being, rare, dangerous, and free. The Übermensch does not merely react to the world, they shape it in their own image. And what is particularly significant is that they often achieve this in complete silence. The Übermensch has no need to win arguments or engage in petty emotional games. They observe, analyze, and carefully choose the moments when to speak, and even more importantly, when to remain silent. They have realized what remains unnoticed by others. Silence is also a form of language, a language that does not seek to persuade, but asserts its presence. The silence of the Übermensch is infused with meaning. It carries menace, authority, and the resonance of self-possession. While others raise their voices, they earn respect with a mere gaze. While others justify themselves, their unwavering calm exposes others' weaknesses. Their silence is like an impenetrable wall, forcing those on the other side to desperately try to decipher what lies behind it. In this desperation, they make mistakes, reveal too much information, and lose their composure. However, this silence is not a manifestation of passivity. Rather, it represents absolute control over one's own energy and its strategic conservation. The Übermensch understands that every word spoken is a revealed hand, every emotional reaction a display of vulnerability. This is why they remain calm, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't require anyone's validation. Their presence speaks volumes and elicits unease, for their silence compels others to look within themselves and confront their own internal clamor. In a world overflowing with noise, those who master the art of silence become the true wielders of power. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as the creator of their own values, rules, and morality. They do not rely on the approval of others, and this is precisely what makes them so formidable. Nothing is as destabilizing as an individual who cannot be manipulated by guilt, fear, or the need for validation. Their silence acts as an impenetrable shield against all these manipulations. And when they do speak, their words possess the power capable of toppling entire empires. But this raises a crucial question. What makes silence so unsettling to others? Why do so many feel threatened when someone simply chooses not to reply? What transpires in the depths of the human mind when an anticipated verbal exchange is met with an all-consuming stillness? The answer lies in the intricate workings of psychology, and it is into this that we will now delve. For to grasp the true power of silence, we must first understand the chaos it sows in the minds of others. And believe me, this phenomenon is far more multifaceted than it appears at first glance. Silence is not just an absence of sound. It is a kind of mirror, and what it reflects proves to be an unbearable sight for many. When a person chooses to remain silent, they not only deprive themselves of a voice, they force the interlocutor to listen to their own voice, to confront their own arguments without external resistance to lean on. And this throws them into confusion, for most people speak not to express their thoughts and feelings, but to defend themselves, to convince themselves of something, to hide that gaping void that lies between their words and who they truly are. And when silence falls, the mask drops. Social psychology has long proven that in conflict situations, silence is perceived as a form of judgment, and it doesn't matter at all whether the person is simply listening. The speaker unwittingly begins to feel vulnerable and insecure. Why? Because without an answer, without a reaction, they lose control of the situation. The human brain enters a state of heightened anxiety. The amygdala, the brain region responsible for fear and anxiety, becomes activated. The person begins to project their own fears and anxieties onto the silent individual. Are they judging me? Have they noticed my insecurity? Do they know I'm bluffing? And on this psychological battleground, silence acts like an invisible blade. It delivers blows where no one sees, but everyone feels. Nietzsche grasped this long before modern psychology confirmed it. In his view, an ordinary person lives like a slave to their reactions. They act impulsively, react out of vanity, speak out of fear of being forgotten. The elevated spirit, the one who masters themselves, remains silent, for they know that every word spoken is a piece given to the enemy. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary cry, revealing where to strike. Moreover, silence has a truly devastating effect on manipulators. People accustomed to emotionally controlling others need their reactions to stay in the game. When a person does not react, they break this vicious cycle, sending the manipulator into a state of panic. They need a response to confirm their dominance. Without it, they become lost, exposing the weakness they meticulously tried to conceal. But there is a deeper aspect. Silence stirs up old emotional wounds. It triggers traumas associated with rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. For suddenly, the person realizes that they are not the center of attention, that their words are insufficient, that their presence fails to make the desired impact, and this becomes an unbearable blow to the narcissistic ego. This is why, by maintaining silence, one is not merely defending themselves. They are striking at the most vulnerable point, at the very heart of the illusion. The art of silence requires considerable fortitude. Remaining silent can cause discomfort, as it contradicts established behavioral patterns that urge us to react, justify, and explain. However, it is precisely in this that the power of silence lies, demanding a honed mastery that is a true manifestation of power. Understanding how silence affects the minds of others by awakening insecurity, dismantling defensive mechanisms, and exposing true intentions opens the way to the conscious and strategic deployment of this potent tool. It is about no longer being a passive observer and learning to turn silence into an effective weapon that allows one to prevail in debates without uttering a single word. By mastering this skill, one becomes invulnerable to manipulation. Knowledge without application is akin to dead theory. Therefore, it is necessary to learn to transform silence into a precise instrument capable of slicing through others' facades at the most unexpected moment. The first step on this path is simple, yet demands considerable willpower. To remain silent when your inner voice demands an immediate reaction. This requires self-mastery, as there is a natural urge to justify or prove oneself. However, this urge is akin to poison, for each concession to it signifies that one remains under the control of others, dependent on their opinions, and entangled in their game. True silence emerges when one suppresses this need and realizes they owe nothing to anyone, and truth requires no words to exist. The second weapon of silence is observational acuity. While others speak, engage in explanations, and try to fill the silence with words, you should listen intently. Listen not with the goal of waiting for your turn to speak, but like a hunter listening for the footsteps of prey in the forest. You must discern fears hidden between the lines, subtle contradictions, and insecurity masked as arrogance. All this information must be etched into memory so that at the opportune moment, when it is time to speak, a precise blow can be delivered. One characteristic of someone who commands the emotional terrain of their interlocutor. The third weapon is timing. It is crucial to learn to sustain pauses as they create tension, and tension is power. When an interlocutor speaks, expecting a reaction that doesn't follow, they experience internal unease. The mind begins to fill the void with assumptions, fears, and suspicions. A simple gaze, accompanied by silence, can make a greater impact than a dozen well-articulated sentences. The fourth weapon is unpredictability. By mastering the art of silence, one becomes unpredictable, which always causes apprehension, as those around you don't know what to expect. As a result, they lose their upper hand, become cautious, and begin to weigh every word. Thus, the dynamic of interaction shifts. From a reactive element, you transform into the gravitational center of the conversation. At this moment, silence ceases to be an absence and becomes a manifestation of pure dominance. However, it is important to understand that silence is not synonymous with inaction. Nietzsche's philosophy is far from advocating weakness. In this context, silence represents an active stance, brimming with inner tension and purpose. It is not an escape from problems, but a period of preparation, analysis, and strategy formulation, where inner strength is so profound it requires no outward display. And when the opportune moment arrives, when silence has served its purpose, one precise, well-calibrated word is enough to conclude the discussion, not through loudness, but through its depth, veracity, and undeniable truth. At the same time, an even more complex question arises, because sometimes the goal is not victory, but emotional survival. In certain situations, people don't just engage in an argument. They exploit, manipulate, and drain you of your energy, sometimes unconsciously. Dominance can occur without a single word. And here begins the darkest phase, when silence transforms from a strategy into the silent scream of an individual who has lost control of their life. Next, we will examine this problem in more detail and show how you can become a target of manipulation without even realizing it. For while you strive to avoid conflict, someone else might be leveraging your silence to their advantage, just as Nietzsche foresaw. What could be more repugnant than being forced into silence? Only the conviction that silence is the sole option. Suppressing anger, making concessions in arguments, and avoiding conflict at all costs are often mistakenly perceived as signs of maturity and composure. But what if this is merely a trap? In many cases, such silence is not wisdom, but a disguised capitulation. Nietzsche clearly saw that what we call peace is often merely the outcome of our forced submission. Have you noticed how some people exploit your composure, your ability to listen, to overlook, and to avoid confrontation? They advance their ideas, impose their will, take your place, and you let them. You convince yourself that the fight isn't worth it, that preserving harmony is more important, that it doesn't matter. But the truth is, this supposed peace comes at a high cost. Worst of all, you are being taken advantage of by those who know you won't fight back. Nietzsche wrote about slave morality, a value system devised by the weak for survival in a world dominated by the strong. This morality is based on humility, guilt, and the desire to be good. It's an invisible code that teaches self-suppression, diminishing one's worth, and submission, all while feeling virtuous. But Nietzsche addressed not those who are ready to resign themselves. He wrote for those who dare to break free from these chains, for those who realize they are being used and are ready to stop participating in their own subjugation. When you accept a silence that consumes you from within, you relinquish your power, even without realizing it. You are shaped by others' expectations. You cease to be yourself, transforming into what others want you to be. This is the complete opposite of what Nietzsche called the will to power. True will to power is not about shouting or dominating others, but about self-mastery, reclaiming control over one's life, and choosing silence not out of fear, but from the realization that you owe nothing to anyone. The era of submissive silence must fade into obscurity, yielding to a silence imbued with significance and presence. This is not the muteness that bends under the blows of fate, nor does it humble itself or justify its right to exist. It is a silence that, like a lighthouse, rises amidst raging chaos, capable of altering the course of events by its mere existence, without a single word. Such silence would have garnered the respect of Nietzsche himself, the silence of an individual who has achieved complete self-mastery. But how does one reach this pinnacle? How does one transform from a puppet to the master of their own destiny? How does one eradicate the herd mentality within and be reborn as someone who commands authority through silence alone? The key lies hidden within the most prominent figure of Nietzsche's philosophy, the Übermensch. And now is the time to understand how to embody this new type of human. Because the world is oversaturated with chatterboxes, it needs those who master the art of silence and rule through it. The culmination has arrived, and now it is crucial to grasp with utmost clarity. Silence is not emptiness, not an absence of anything, not merely a pause between words. True silence is the quintessence of presence, a mastery, a sign that the individual no longer reacts to the world, but shapes it through the very fact of their existence. Nietzsche never addressed those content with mere survival. His words were for those who strive for self-overcoming, who are ready to tear off the masks imposed by society, even if it causes pain. The Übermensch's silence is not the muteness of the oppressed or the coward. It is the calm of a warrior who has won the victory before the battle even began, the composure of one who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone because they know their worth and understand what they deserve. Now, reflect on your own life. How many times have you remained silent out of fear, guilt, or an unwillingness to cause discomfort? How many times have you allowed others to decide for you, speak on your behalf, or trample your truth? It's time to put an end to this. Nietzsche would argue that such an existence is an insult to life itself, that accepting such silence is tantamount to self-betrayal. From this day forward, silence must change its tone, cease to be an escape, and transform into an invisible cry of authority, a boundary asserting your essence, even if no one understands. Because who you are doesn't need understanding. It needs to be lived, and that requires courage. Do you possess this courage? Then remember, the weak shout, the strong are silent, the wise choose when.